Hello everyone, my name's Mark Corcoran. I'm one of the co-authors of Metal Uniform Embellishments of the Australian Army post-1953, that is the QE2 series if you like. Volume 1 is a document that covers insignia for corps and school insignia in that period. That book's available from the link below this material, and in this brief presentation we're going to take you through parts of the book which relate to how you tell one form of manufacturing activity from another when you're looking at badge specimens in your collection. I hope you enjoy it. In the last third of the manuscript, you'll find a section called Rogues, Repros and Regimental Shop Items. You'll find that it is in a salmon pink colour compared to the blue of the rest of the book. And if you turn to page 546, you'll be right at the beginning of that section. When you get to that page, you will see on that page a close-up image of a general service hat badge, and that picture shows a series of piercings. There's two in the crown, there's one immediately below the crown, and then there's one on the right-hand side in the scroll work, one on the left-hand side in the scroll work, and it's within these piercings in this badge that you can start to see some vertical lines that are nicely reproduced in this photograph, and they are indicative of press shear marks and indicate that these piercings have been done by a process of a male and female die being pressed together in a large hydraulic press. What we're going to be doing in this part of the material is to show you the difference between construction processes or manufacturing processes used to produce Australian military insignia, which are most likely to be legitimate and which are most likely to be questionable. So if this is the face of a general service hat badge with several piercings in it, let's have a look at how these things are actually made. To do that, it's time to turn to page 541 of the book, and on that page, back in the very end of the blue section of the book, you'll find a close-up picture of the edge of a general service hat badge. Again, it's a microscopic class photograph, and it shows you what we're trying to point out as indicative of die press manufacture. Now, this photo here in the highlighted area does a reasonable job of showing you a series of parallel vertical shear marks. This is indicative of the die being pressed past a sheet of material, and it leaves these parallel striations where the sheet material has been cut away to produce the form of the badge. Interestingly enough, at the edge of these die press shear marks, you'll find this confused crystalline structure right at the end, which shows that the press has struck the material from the badge face side, compressed the material in the press down to the point where it actually shatters the material along the final edge towards the back of the badge. So these are shear marks, and these are compression fractures along the edge. Now, this is all tightly associated with proper die press manufacture. If we look at other pages in the book that we've provided, you'll see we've also described other forms of manufacture, and the most common one of those is centrifugal casting, and we can see an example of centrifugal casting on page 544. If you go to that page, you'll see again a general service hat badge, and this area at the top here is the front of the badge. This band along here is actually the thickness of the badge itself, and you can see what looks like die shear marks here, just to the right of where it's highlighted. But one thing that's particularly odd about this is this little trench that runs through here. And what that is it's an indication that this badge is in fact a copy of an original badge which was die struck. This thoroughly accurate centrifugally cast reproduction is actually accurate enough to reproduce some of the die shear marks, but in the manufacturing process, the mold top and bottom halves were joined at this position here, And when the badge was centrifugally cast, that is, molten metal was poured into a spinning mould, and we'll show you pictures of what that looks like later, there was a slight defect in the way the mould halves joined, and they've left this little telltale trench. So what we're trying to say here is when you've got a specimen in front of you and it appears to have die shear marks on it, if there are other hemispherical mould marks of some kind or another, the chances are you're looking at a second generation copy. And this is what one of those giveaways can look like. We'll talk about another, which is on page 545. If you go to that page, you'll see that we've got a slightly blurred image of a 53 to 65 period educational corps hat badge. The depth of field just gives you enough information to show what it is. But if you look at the forefront of the photograph, and if you then look at the external edge of the badge, you can see here this little giveaway lip that follows around the badge. And this is an indication of where the top mould and the bottom mould were actually joined together, and the lip, the slight ooze, if you like, between these two hemispherical moulds can still be seen along the edge of the badge. So at first glance, this badge probably looks like an ordinary run-of-the-mill period-made item, but it's not. It's most likely to be a later reproduction. That doesn't mean it's completely dodgy, of course. It just means it's not the die-pressed example that you might assume that it is. If we go on a little further to talk about the different forms of manufacture, and specifically centrifugally cast items, if you turn to page 543, you can see the back of an armoured corps badge. You can see the solder mounting for the pin. You can see the clutch grip groove on the edge of the pin. And you can see that it is, in fact, a nail point rather than a rounded pin. It's actually got facets to the edge of the pin. But more to the point, when you follow the pin down to the base of the badge, you can see that the badge itself has what's called a hemispherical mould mark that runs around the insides of where these piercings are. It's quite clear. And this is the point where the back and the front half of the centrifugal moulding material actually join. So the manufacturer has been quite thorough and quite professional and tried to make the mould marks either join right here along the bottom edge of the badge or precisely halfway through the meat of the badge. And in this particular case, that mould join mark happens to be in the middle and in the meat of the badge. So what you're seeing here is a well-made regimental or corps badge. In this case, it's a corps badge for Armoured Corps. And the piercings show clear die marks, which it's not as easy to see on the outer edge, but if you look carefully at the photo, you can actually see them there. It's just that the telltale sign's much clearer in these piercings. I hope that helps you to identify what you're looking for. If we now move backwards one page to page 542 and we look at the photo at the bottom of the page, you can see a series of hemispherical mould marks all being presented to you at once. Now, forgive the depth of field issues, but if you start at the bottom of the image, you can see a hemispherical mould mark traced through the highlight at the bottom of the photo, up and around the internal edge, out to the left-hand side of the image. And it's important that you understand that this is consistent across the entire manufacture of the badge. It shows you the tide mark, if you like, between the upper and lower moulds. And so there's a parallel join mark in the piercing, which is immediately below that. And quite tellingly, if you then go towards the top of the photo and have a look at the outer edge, you can see that same halfway mark of the mould join, or the hemispherical join mark. You can trace that all the way along out to the top left of the badge. So you can see here throughout the entire face and obverse of the badge, you can see a consistent tide mark, and this is where the mould joins have met. Now, if you then look at the photo at the top of page 542, what you can see here is the beginnings of the identification of things that go beyond just a differentiation between die pressed and centrifugally cast. You can start to see something that is pretending to be something that it's not. This is where we go from regimental shop items, if you like, to rogues. When you have a look at the photo at the top of page 542, you'll find that it is a badge core collar. And when you look at it, we've taken the photo with the microscope so that you can actually see some evidence of what looks initially like die shear marks. So if you look at the highlight in the middle of the badge, you can see this area here that's burnt out in terms of highlight. But on the left, you can start seeing quite clear marks of one kind. Now they look like die shear marks because they are almost at right angles to the thickness of the badge, and they appear to be reasonably parallel. But if you look just on the left hand side, you can see that there's a series of other marks which are more confused, and the angle is not consistent with the marks right beside them. This is a dead giveaway of somebody using a fret saw to cut out the piercings in a badge, or more likely in this case, a file to actually remove evidence of the mold join marks. Now you can see on the upper edge of the badge, which is just above the halfway mark in the photograph, you can see a range of marks on the right hand side that appear to be reasonably vertical. Then you can see them sloping at a 30 to 40 degree angle to the left. Then you can see below the area associated with the lug on the back of the badge, you can see that they again change angle. And then on the extreme left-hand side of the image, you can see that again that they reverse and come back the other way. This is a classic indication that the badge edge has been filed, dressed up to make it look neater and prettier, but in the process it gives a fingerprint of exactly what was going on. Someone's tried to tart this up and make this look like it's neater than it actually was in manufacture. They've taken probably some fairly ugly mold marks and they've removed them, and in the process they've left evidence of exactly how that dressing was done. I hope that helps you tell the difference from the beginning of this clip, something that has been machine made, towards the end, something that has been physically interfered with after production to make it look like something that it isn't. I hope that gives you a good insight into some manufacturing indications on the material that you will find that you're collecting and trading. Thank you.